Good to be with you today again. If you will, turn your Bible to Matthew chapter 18. We're going to read a couple things there. A long time ago now, it's been when I was a teenager, my older brother, remember, went forward one time and at where surfing was baptized. And I remember afterwards we were in the car and we're riding home, and my younger brother Berlin thought he was going to be funny, and we're sitting in the back seat, and he turned around. My brother Kenny had been just baptized. Berlin goes, "Let's make him sin." When you think about it, it's like the devil incarnate right there in front of you. But I want to think about that for a second. Have you ever made someone sin? Have you ever wanted to make someone sin? I hope not. But does that happen sometimes? What does God think about if we make someone else sin? Well, look at Matthew 18. We're going to read verses 2 through 6. Jesus speaking says, "Then Jesus called a little child to him, set him in the midst of them, and said, 'Assuredly I say to you, unless you are converted and become as little children, you will by no means enter the kingdom of heaven. Therefore, whoever humbles himself as this little child is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven. Whoever receives one little child like this in my name receives me. But whoever causes one of these little ones who believe in me to sin, it would be better for him if a millstone were hung around his neck and he were drowned in the depths of the sea.'" It'd be better for him to have a millstone put around his neck and thrown into the sea. Sin is bad. It's really bad. He goes on to say here in verse 8, he says, "If your hand or foot cause you to sin, cut it off and cast it from you. It is better for you to enter into life lame or maimed, rather than having 2 hands or 2 feet be cast in the everlasting fire." Next verse he says, "And if your eye causes you to sin, pluck it out and cast it from you. It is better for you to enter into life with 1 eye, rather than having 2 eyes to be cast into hell fire." Sin is very, very bad. And I think sometimes we think, we think about, well, that's not so. No, sin is very, very bad. That same brother Kenny, some years later, he went to Africa to preach some, and I said, "Well, bring me something back from Africa," and he said, "Want me to bring you back Ebola?" Ebola virus is very, very bad. You don't want something like that. It's sort of like the Black Plague of the modern world. You read about accounts of people having that. It's really, really bad. But sin is worse. Sin is worse. In Hebrews chapter 9, verse 22, it says, "Without shedding of blood, there is no remission of sin." Sin is so bad that in order to get remission from it, in order to get forgiveness for it, there has to occur at some point shedding of blood. And back under the old law, that's what they did. They sacrificed, right? They would bring a lamb or some animal, and it would be sacrificed. They would spill the blood. And this occurred at the temple. At the Temple Mount, I haven't been there, but I believe you can still go and see where there were troughs dug in the pavement of the Temple Mount to carry away the blood from so many animals that were sacrificed. It is really, really bad. In Matthew chapter 10 and verse 28, we see that there's consequences to sin. It says, "And do not fear those who kill the body, but cannot kill the soul, but rather fear him who is able to destroy both soul and body in hell." Why is that bad? Because that's where sin will lead you. We can lose our soul because of sin. Because of sin, we can be cast into hell. And that's worse than anything that we can imagine. And so that's something we should be afraid of. You know, we might be afraid of disease, might be afraid of Ebola or something like that. Sin is worse. So let me ask, would you want to give someone Ebola virus? No, wouldn't want to. Well, what about sin? Would you want to live your life so that you cause someone else to sin? Turn to Galatians chapter 2, if you would. Galatians 2. And there in verses 11 through 13, Paul is writing. And he talked about Peter. It says, "Now when Peter had come to Antioch, I withstood him to his face because he was to be blamed. For before certain men came from James, he would eat with the Gentiles, but when they came, he withdrew and separated himself, fearing those who were of the circumcision. And the rest of the Jews also played the hypocrite with him, so that even Barnabas was carried away with their hypocrisy." Peter acted wrong, and he caused other people to sin. Well, now, we just read where Jesus said, you know, if you have these people, he said, you got to become like a little child. And if someone causes one of these little childs or one of these people, one of these Christians who believe in me to sin, it's better you put a millstone around his neck and drop him into the sea, because that's how bad it is. Peter was an apostle, yet he caused other people to sin. And so if that can happen to Peter, maybe I better look at myself too. Okay. In Titus chapter 1, verse 6 and 7, talks about the requirements for an elder, qualifications for an elder. One of it is that they're blameless. They're above reproach. Well, why? Well, because they can lead others astray. Through their example, through the team, they can lead others astray. We can lead others astray. What if phone rings and, you know, when your kids or someone answers the phone and it's some annoying salesman or something, you know, wanting to speak to you. And tell them I'm not here. What have you just done? You just told your kids it's okay to lie. If it's a circumstance, it's okay to lie. That's what you've told them, you know. And do you think that we can do that and then our kids not do it too? You know, I grew up watching Andy Griffith on TV. Some of us older. I'm kind of amazed some of the young people, they don't know things. I point out someone that's driving down I-39 the other day, went by a town called Troy Grove, and guy I was with, he's in his mid-20s, said, you know the claim to fame of Troy Grove over here? He goes, no. I said, that's where Wild Bill Hickok was born. He had no clue who Wild Bill Hickok was, okay? But we take things for granted. I watched Andy Griffith growing up, and then I remember one time when the Darlings, some of you know who I'm talking about, was in, they're eating meals, and they're passing around food, and it got around to Mr. Darling, and there was out food, and it's like he'd yell, meat, you know, for Aunt B to bring out the meat. And then something else happened. He's like, you know, yelled out salad or whatever. And then a third time came to Opie. And it was supposed to be bread on the plate. And he was about 8 years old and no bread. So he yells out, bread! You know, like bring me some bread. Kids pick up on that. I think we all know that. They're going to mimic us. And if we do something that's wrong, they're going to do it too. And in that sense, we can lead someone astray. You know, are you a Christian? Are you a believer? You know, we shouldn't be doing those things. And we should not be doing things where people look at us and they use us as an example and we lead others astray. Or it could be that maybe we don't do something that we should be doing. Yeah. In James chapter 2, verse 24, it says, you see then that man is justified by works and not by faith only. In John 1, verse 12, it says, "But as many as received him, to them he gave the right to become children of God, to them who believe in his name." We can turn to verses and see that to be a Christian, it's more than just believing. We have to do something. We have to be baptized. Okay, what if you're a believer, but you are never baptized? As this, because I actually know this case with someone. I know it with someone who used to attend here. Okay, where he was here each time, he believed, but he never was baptized. I don't know if he's ever been baptized because his dad didn't want to be baptized. And he thought, well, I have some camaraderie with my dad. The rest of his family were baptized Christians. But he kept putting it off. What's he doing? If he's lost and his dad is lost, you think in hell his dad's going to think, oh, thanks for sticking with me? No, he'll hate him for that. Okay? He'll hate him for not showing the faith to do what's required to be a Christian. Okay? And maybe by our neglect, by our omission of something, we're hurting someone else. Yeah, what do you mean about being baptized? What? So-and-so over here is not baptized. Why should I be? He goes to your church. He doesn't do it. Why should I? So we can do things and hold people back. Or maybe I'm just lazy. I know I should get up and come to services. Church is nice, but not that important, and stuff like that. Let me ask this. Do you want your kids to go to heaven? Do you want them to be faithful Christians, to attend services and stuff like that? Okay, now then, how many people do you know that did not attend church regularly? They show up every once in a while. How many of them do you know have faithful children? I'd be surprised if you know any. Because what they did was they taught their kids that, well, church really isn't that important. Okay? And we can do that. And it may just be something peer pressure. We do that. Peer pressure, who are you going to influence? It's sort of like, I heard about giving a pill to a horse. You know how you give a pill to a horse? You get a tube, and you put the pill inside the tube, and then you put one end in the horse's mouth and one end in your mouth, and then it's just a matter of who blows first. So maybe, we should influence someone for the good, and what we're actually doing is we're influencing someone for the bad. Because we can certainly do that. We can tell things wrong. When my nephew Gary was in grade school, I actually knew his teacher, had known her for some time, was friends with her, and I was at the school for some reason. And so I sat in his class. I'm sitting there, and the teacher's telling him something, some math problem or something. And she's there, and she's explaining something, and I'm sitting there, I'm thinking, that's not right. And, I'm going like this, and then she realizes, she told him wrong and changed it or something. But as teacher, I teach now. I teach college. And because I can tell someone something wrong, I have a greater responsibility. And that's true in Scripture too. In James chapter 3, verse 1, teachers face a stricter judgment. Why? Because they can lead someone astray. In Acts 18, 24-26, talking about Apollos, man mighty in Scriptures, but he didn't know the full story. And so Priscilla and Aquila took him aside and taught him more accurately. Why? Because he could have led someone astray. Or it could just be leaving out the essential part. We need to tell the whole story. When I first got up here, I was working for Amoco over here at the Research Center in Naperville. I was trying to hook up computers. Computers were kind of early back then. I'm trying to make it do something. I had the manual, and I would program it, and it would not do it. And I read the manual, and I couldn't find it, would not. And then I was flipping through it, and I saw a caption, a figure, and down in the caption, about 7 or 8 point type, it said you had to send the number 1 to it first. I'm still looking for the guy that wrote that manual. Okay. Because something extremely important they didn't tell. And if I'm going to be a teacher, anyone that's ever stood up here and taught a class or taught a class downstairs knows you got to get it right. You got to teach it and teach the whole word. In 1 Timothy 3, verse 2, where Paul exhorts Timothy, be able to teach. Not only that, he said, find people who can teach others also. Be able to teach. In 2 Timothy 2, verse 15, it says, study to show thyself approved, rightly dividing the word of truth. Not only do we have to teach it, we have to do it right. We have to get it right. I've told you this story, I think, before, but when I graduated high school, I was appointed to the military academy. Okay? And I actually went there and then decided I didn't want to make a career out of the Army and stuff. But we had certain duties at meals, and one of the thing at meals, you sat at a table, 10 people at a table, 4 on one side, 4 on the other side, table commandant one end and a plebe down the other end. And the guy down next to the plebe, he was the gunner. He had to cut the dessert that we had for the day. So we'd have dessert. He had to hold it up, announce what it was, and ask if anyone didn't care for dessert. Okay. And you got to picture us, we're all sitting at attention with our eyes on the plate, like that. So he announced, and if you didn't want dessert, you stuck your fist out, and he was allowed to glance down the table and count how many fists. And then he had to subtract that from the number 10 and divide the dessert into equal portions. Okay. So this one day, table had cherry pie. Guy holds up, and now, sir, for dessert, we are having cherry pie. Would anyone not care for dessert today, please, sir? And one person stuck their fist out. He glanced at that. So now he has to cut it into 9 pieces, and they have to be equal. Okay? How do you do that? Well, you're supposed to make a template carrying your cap with these angles marked out, and then you put a piece of bread on the pie, set on, mark your cut. He didn't have that. And if he was smart, he wouldn't have eaten pie either, so he had to cut it into 8 pieces, but he didn't do that. So he's cutting pieces. He has one piece like this and one like that, and the table commandant looks down the table and he sees what he's doing. He says, mister, you're making a mess of that pie and you better do something really quick. And the guy sat there for a second. He took his knife out and he stuck it in the pie. He just ripped it to shreds. And he got done and he held it up and says, sir, for dessert we are having Cherry's Jubilee. Okay? Yeah. Because then you just take a spoon and you scoop and put it on. And that's how some people treat the scripture. I'll take a scoop here, I'll take a scoop there, and maybe one over here, and they think they got it right. No. We have to rightly divide the word of truth. We have to see how things fit together. Like we talked about Book of John in class. Some things he pulls from here, but the point is he makes it all fit together. And that's what we have to do. Because we have a duty to others too. We have a duty to your spouse. You want to cause your spouse to sin, you want to nag them, you want to drive them away. 1 Corinthians 7 verse 5 says, do something less where you let Satan tempt your spouse. Matthew 5:32 says you do something that causes her to commit adultery. You don't want to do that. You have duties to children. Ephesians 6:4, fathers, provoke not your children to wrath. Bring them up in the nourishment of the Lord. Proverbs 13:24 talks about someone who doesn't discipline his child, hates his child. Because you want him to do what's right. Proverbs 22 verse 4, train up a child in the way he should go. When he's old, he won't depart from it. A responsibility there. Ezekiel chapter 33 talks about a watchman whose job it is to warn the city if danger comes. And he says, if that person doesn't do it, it's on them. If I know something and I know it's wrong, and I don't tell someone over here it's wrong, have I done it right? I may participate in their sin. Or what about this? What about, let's say you got a young couple of teenagers, and the girl has a new boyfriend, and he's coming over to their house for the first time, and the father is a diehard Green Bay Packers fan. And she tells him before he comes home, hey, wear your Bears sweatshirt. Think that's going to go over good? No. And you wouldn't do that. You don't want, your boyfriend to be on the bad side of your father. Well, what about your heavenly Father? Would you wear something immodest that causes them to sin? Do you care enough about them for that? Wouldn't you want God to like them too? Especially if you like someone, don't you want God to like them too? Then why would you do something to try to make them sin? In Matthew chapter 22, verses 36, 39, we have an admonition there with our neighbors. 22, what did I say? 36 through 39? Yeah. He says, teacher, which is the great commandment in the law? Jesus said to him, you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind. This is the first and great commandment. And the second is like it. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. Well, who's your neighbor? Well, it can be anybody. Love them as yourself. And I believe that also means you don't cause them to sin. People can't point their finger at you and say, well, the reason they're doing that is because this guy here. Or maybe the reason they're not doing something they should be doing is because of this guy here. Because what would you think if you actually knew that you caused someone else to sin? I was down, had a meeting for camp staff, and it's down just north of Clinton, Illinois, yesterday. And when I was in graduate school in Missouri, I used to leave home. I drove down Route 54 and went through Clinton. And now you go around this town, but back then you went through the town. I came to Clinton one time. I came into Clinton, and there was a semi stopped and a car stopped in the road, and there had just been a accident. Semi had hit the car. Okay. Police were not even there yet. I stopped, I looked, there were 2 people passed out in the car. I didn't know if they were alive or dead. And there's a truck driver over here and someone with him, and he was crying like a baby because this car had pulled out in front of him, and he hit him, and he thought that he had killed 2 people. I mean, he was remorse. He was devastated because he thought he had killed 2 people. Turned out he hadn't. They were both unconscious, but police came and revived both of them. Okay. But think about that. If I killed somebody, even if it's accidental, that'd be hard to live with, wouldn't it? And we think, no, I don't want to do that. I don't want to have that on my mind. I don't want that on my conscience. That I killed somebody. You know what? I did. Because of me, Jesus died on the cross. Because of my sin and yours, Jesus died. Because that's how bad sin is. And without shedding of blood, there is no remission of sin. Someone had to give his life, and Jesus gave his life so that I don't have to. And I've known people who've been in combat where their lives were saved by someone else, and that sticks with them forever. You know what? This is something that should stick with us forever, that each day we think, you know what? Jesus died for me so that I don't have to. And because of that, I'm going to live my life like he wants me to, and I'm going to live my life so that I don't cause someone else to sin. And that's a responsibility we have to take seriously. And that's a responsibility that we have to work at sometimes. And that may mean we get up and we go to services when we're just dead tired because we want our children to see our faith. And it means that we act in a certain way around others because we want others to see our faith. And it means that we act upon our faith so that no one can fault us, say, well, look at Chumley over there. Look at the way he lives. No. We have to live our life so that we go to heaven and others go to heaven too. And that's what we got to do. So if you're here today and you maybe need to change things, maybe you need to live in such a way so that you're the proper example for someone else, let's make that plan. Let's work at it so that we can have a home in heaven. If you're here today and we can help you in that regard, why don't you come while we stand and we sing.
Come to Jesus, he will save.